The playground was supposed to be safe. It was the one place where the Mafia boss, Alessandro Romano, allowed his daughter to be just a child. No guards, no body armor, no shadows following her. Just swings, sunshine, and innocence. But today, something was wrong. As his black SUV rolled to a stop, Alessandro spotted his daughter on the far bench. Not laughing, not playing, but leaning silently against a little boy he had never seen before. A boy with torn shoes, a dirty face, clothes too small for his thin frame, a homeless boy. And the Mafia boss's daughter was clutching his arm, as if she trusted him. Alessandro's heart dropped. He slammed the door and rushed across the park, his men scrambling behind him. "Sweetheart," he called out, fear hidden behind his rough voice. "What's wrong? Who is he?" The homeless boy flinched when he saw the men approaching. Eyes wide, shoulders tightening, as if preparing to run. But Alessandro's daughter grabbed her father's sleeve. "Daddy, stop," she whispered. He froze. Tears filled her eyes. He helped me," she said. "I fell. I hurt my leg. Nobody came. He stayed with me so I wouldn't be scared." The boy lowered his gaze, expecting anger, punishment, maybe even violence. He'd seen that look from grown men before, but not this time. Because Alessandro noticed something he wasn't prepared for. His daughter wasn't just leaning on the boy. She was protecting him, shielding him, as if he was the one who needed saving. "Sir," the boy whispered shakily, I didn't touch her. I just didn't want her to cry." For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. The Mafia boss, the man feared across the city, knelt down slowly. Not to intimidate, but to look the boy in the eyes. And what he did next shocked everyone at that playground, including his own men. "Stay with me until the end," because what Alessandro discovered about that homeless boy changed both of their lives in a way no one saw coming. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Alessandro Romano had built his empire on intimidation, on the ability to read people in seconds, on knowing who posed a threat and who didn't. But looking into the eyes of this trembling child, all his instincts were screaming something different. This wasn't fear of getting caught doing something wrong. This was the fear of someone who expected the worst, because that's all life had ever given him. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 years old. His clothes were clean but worn thin from too many washes, patched in places where the fabric had torn. His sneakers were held together with tape, and his hair looked like he'd cut it himself with whatever he could find. But his eyes held something Alessandro recognized from his own childhood on the streets of Naples. Hunger, not just for food, but for safety, for belonging, for someone, anyone, to show him kindness. "What's your name, son?" Alessandro asked, his voice softer than his men had ever heard it. The boy's lips moved, but no sound came out at first. He cleared his throat and tried again. "Marco," he whispered. "Marco Vitale." Alessandro's blood went cold. Vitale. He knew that name, had known it for 20 years. The name belonged to a man who used to work for his organization. A good man, a loyal man, a man who had died protecting Alessandro's family when rival gangs tried to take over their territory. "Your father," Alessandro said carefully. "What was his name?" Marco's eyes filled with tears he was trying desperately to hold back. "Giuseppe Vitale, but everyone called him Joey. He died when I was little. My mama said he was brave, that he died protecting good people." The words hit Alessandro like a physical blow. Joey Vitale, the man who had taken a bullet meant for Alessandro's own father. The man whose sacrifice had allowed the Romano family to maintain their hold on the city. The man whose widow and son Alessandro had sworn to take care of, but in the chaos of expanding the business and fighting off competitors, he had lost track of them. Alessandro's daughter, Sofia, looked up at her father with those innocent brown eyes that melted his heart every single day. "Daddy, Marco's mama is sick. He was trying to find medicine for her. That's why he was at the playground. He said he comes here sometimes when he's scared because it reminds him of being safe. She has the coughing sickness, Marco added quietly. She can't work anymore. We lost our apartment last month. We sleep in the shelter sometimes, but it's full most nights. So we sleep in the park or under the bridge by the river. Alessandro felt something crack inside his chest. Here was the son of the man who had died for his family, living on the streets, caring for his sick mother. And Alessandro had no idea. Worse than that, while he was sending Sofia to private schools and buying her everything she could ever want, Joey's son was digging through garbage cans looking for medicine money. "How long has your mother been sick?" Alessandro asked. Marco wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "Since last winter. The doctor said she needs medicine, but it costs too much. I try to help. I collect bottles and cans. Sometimes people give me money when I help them carry groceries, but it's never enough." Sofia squeezed Marco's hand tighter. "Daddy, can we help him? Please. He's really nice, and he made me feel better when I was hurt." Alessandro looked at his daughter, then at Marco, then at his men who were standing a respectful distance away, but close enough to move if needed. These were hardened criminals, men who had seen everything the dark side of life could offer. But even they looked uncomfortable witnessing the desperation in this child's eyes. "Marco," Alessandro said, "I want you to listen to me very carefully. Your father was a hero. He saved my life, and he saved my family's life. I made a promise to take care of you and your mother, and I broke that promise. I'm going to fix that right now." Marco's eyes went wide. You knew my papa?" "I knew your papa very well. He was one of the best men I ever met. And if he could see you now, taking care of your mother, being kind to my daughter when she needed help, he would be so proud of you." Alessandro stood up and pulled out his phone. Within seconds, one of his lieutenants answered. "Get Dr. Castellano on the phone right now. Tell him it's an emergency. Then call the Meridian Hotel and book the penthouse suite indefinitely. And get a team to the homeless shelter on 5th Street. I need them to find a woman named Vitale, who's been staying there with her son." Marco's face went pale. "Are you going to hurt my mama?" Alessandro knelt back down and placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. "Son, I'm going to make sure your mama gets the best medical care in the city. I'm going to make sure you both have a safe place to live. And I'm going to make sure you never have to worry about money for medicine or food or anything else ever again." "But why?" Marco asked, confusion written all over his face. "I don't understand." Sofia smiled at her new friend. "Because that's what family does for family. Right, Daddy?" Alessandro nodded, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Not the cold satisfaction of a business deal completed or an enemy defeated, but warmth, purpose, the knowledge that he was finally doing something that would make his own father proud. "That's exactly right, sweetheart," he said. "Marco, your father died protecting our family. That makes you family too. And we take care of family." But Alessandro had no idea that this moment of kindness, this decision to help Joey's son, was about to set in motion a series of events that would test everything he believed about loyalty, family, and the thin line between justice and revenge. Within 30 minutes, Alessandro's world had transformed into something he barely recognized. Dr. Castellano arrived at the playground in his private medical van, a man Alessandro had kept on retainer for years to handle emergencies that couldn't involve hospitals or questions. But this wasn't about covering up violence or treating gunshot wounds. This was about saving the life of a woman who had already lost everything. "Take us to your mother," Alessandro told Marco, who still looked like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The boy led them through streets Alessandro knew well, but had never really seen. Past the luxury shops and expensive restaurants his family frequented, down alleys where broken streetlights cast long shadows, to a part of the city where hope seemed to die a little more each day. They stopped at a cardboard shelter tucked between two abandoned buildings, barely visible unless you knew exactly where to look. "Mama," Marco called softly, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had learned to be gentle with broken things. "There are some people here who want to help." A woman emerged from the makeshift shelter, and Alessandro felt his breath catch. This was not the vibrant young mother he remembered from Joey's funeral all those years ago. Maria Vitale had been beautiful then, full of life despite her grief, holding her toddler son close as she accepted the envelope of money Alessandro had pressed into her hands. Now she was thin, almost skeletal, her skin pale and waxy. Her clothes hung on her frame like they belonged to someone else, and when she coughed, Alessandro could hear the rattle in her chest from 10 feet away. But her eyes still held that fierce, protective love he remembered. The same look she'd given him at the funeral when she'd whispered, "Take care of yourself, Mr. Romano. My Joey died believing you were worth saving." "Maria," Alessandro said, his voice rougher than he intended. "It's Alessandro Romano. Do you remember me?" Recognition flickered across her face, followed immediately by fear. She stepped protectively in front of Marco, despite being barely strong enough to stand. "What do you want?" she whispered. "We haven't done anything wrong. Marco's a good boy. He doesn't get into trouble." "I know he's a good boy," Alessandro said gently. "He just saved my daughter's life. And I'm here because I made your husband a promise 20 years ago, and I've spent every day since then breaking it." Dr. Castellano stepped forward, his medical bag in hand. "Mrs. Vitale, I'm Dr. Castellano. I'd like to examine you, if you'll let me. From what I can see and hear, you have a serious respiratory infection that's gone untreated for far too long." Maria looked from the doctor to Alessandro to her son, confusion written across her gaunt features. "I don't understand. I can't pay for a doctor. We don't have insurance." "You don't need to pay," Alessandro said. "Your husband died protecting my family. The least I can do is make sure his family is taken care of." Sophia, who had been unusually quiet during the drive, stepped forward and took Maria's hand. "My daddy says Marco's papa was a hero. That means Marco's a hero too, and heroes shouldn't have to live in boxes." The simple innocence of his daughter's words hit Alessandro harder than any business meeting or territorial dispute ever had. Here was his 8-year-old daughter, raised in luxury and privilege, showing more compassion than most adults he knew. And here was Marco, the same age as Sophia, who had been living on the streets but still found the kindness to comfort a crying child. Dr. Castellano's examination was swift but thorough. When he finished, his expression was grave. "Mrs. Vitale, you have pneumonia. It's advanced, and without immediate treatment, it could become life-threatening. You need to be in a hospital." "I told you, I can't afford," Maria began, but Alessandro cut her off. "The hospital bill is already taken care of. So is everything else. Dr. Castellano will personally oversee your treatment. You'll have a private room, the best medications, whatever you need to get better." Maria stared at him, tears streaming down her face. Why? After all these years, why now? Alessandro looked at Marco, who was holding his mother's other hand, trying to be brave but clearly terrified of losing the only family he had left. "Because your son reminded me what it means to be human. Because he showed my daughter kindness when he had every reason to be bitter about the world. Because I've been so busy building an empire that I forgot the people who died to make it possible." The ride to the hospital was quiet. Maria dozed fitfully against Marco's shoulder while Sophia chatted quietly with the boy about her school, her friends, her favorite movies. Alessandro watched his daughter include this homeless child in her world as naturally as breathing, and he realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Not just kindness, but the kind of pure acceptance that adults spend years trying to rediscover. At the hospital, Alessandro's name opened every door. Maria was admitted immediately, settled into a private room with a view of the city, connected to machines that would monitor her breathing and deliver the medications she desperately needed. For the first time in months, she was warm, safe, and receiving proper medical care. Marco sat beside her bed, holding her hand, his eyes wide as he took in the clean white sheets, the soft blankets, the steady beeping of monitors that meant his mother was finally getting help. "Is she going to be okay?" he asked Dr. Castellano. With proper treatment and rest, she should make a full recovery, the doctor assured him. But it's going to take time. Several weeks, maybe longer. Where will Marco stay while his mother recovers? Sophia asked, looking up at her father with those expressive eyes that always got whatever they wanted. Alessandro had been wondering the same thing. The boy couldn't stay at the hospital indefinitely, and sending him back to the streets was unthinkable. There were foster families, temporary placements, but the thought of Marco being shuffled through the system while his mother fought for her life seemed cruel. "He'll stay with us," Alessandro said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. Marco's head snapped up. "With you? But I don't know how to live in a big house. I don't have nice clothes. I don't know how to act around rich people." Sophia giggled. "You don't have to act any different. Just be Marco. That's why my daddy likes you." "She's right," Alessandro said. "You'll have your own room, new clothes, good food, whatever you need. And you can visit your mother every day until she's well enough to come home." "Come home where?" Marco asked quietly. Alessandro smiled. "We'll figure that out together. But I promise you this, son. You and your mother will never be homeless again. You'll never have to choose between medicine and food. You'll never have to dig through garbage cans or sleep under bridges. Your father died protecting what's mine, and now you're mine to protect." But even as Alessandro made these promises, he had no idea that his decision to bring Marco into his world was about to attract the attention of people who had been watching, waiting, planning. People who saw opportunity in kindness and weakness in compassion. People who remembered Joey Vitale for very different reasons than Alessandro did. The boy who had comforted a crying child in a playground was about to become the center of a storm that would test every loyalty Alessandro had ever known and force him to choose between the empire he'd built and the family he was trying to save. The first night Marco stayed in the Romano mansion, he didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of the king-sized bed in his new room, staring at walls that cost more than most people made in a year, waiting for someone to tell him it was all a mistake, that he didn't belong here, that he needed to leave. At 3 a.m, Sophia appeared in his doorway wearing princess pajamas and carrying a stuffed elephant. "Can't sleep either?" she whispered. Marco shook his head. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up back under the bridge." Sophia climbed onto the bed beside him. "My daddy doesn't lie. If he says you're staying, you're staying. But I think you're scared of something else." The boy looked at her with those old eyes that had seen too much. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I break something? What if your daddy realizes I'm just street trash?" "You're not trash," Sophia said firmly. "You're my friend, and friends don't let friends think mean things about themselves." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two children from completely different worlds finding common ground in the darkness. "Marco," Sophia said eventually, "do you know what my daddy does for work?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marco had heard whispers on the streets, rumors about the Romano family, about what happened to people who crossed them, about the kind of power that could make a sick woman disappear into the best hospital in the city with one phone call. "I think so," Marco said quietly. "Are you scared of him?" Marco thought about this carefully. "I should be, but when he looks at me, he doesn't look at me the way other grown-ups do, like I'm a problem to solve or something dirty they don't want to touch. He looks at me like I matter." "That's because you do matter," Sophia said. "You saved me when I was hurt. That makes you family now." But family, as Marco was about to learn, came with complications he never could have imagined. The next morning brought the first test. Alessandro sat at the head of a massive dining table, reading newspaper headlines about a warehouse fire on the east side of town. 3 men in expensive suits sat across from Marco, their eyes cold and calculating as they studied the boy who had somehow earned their boss's protection overnight. "Who's the kid?" asked Vincent Torino, Alessandro's underboss, a man whose smile never reached his eyes. "Marco Vitale," Alessandro said, without looking up from his paper. "Joey's son." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vincent's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The other men exchanged glances that Marco didn't understand, but definitely didn't like. "Joey Vitale's kid?" Vincent said slowly. "The Joey Vitale who got himself killed 20 years ago?" "The Joey Vitale who died protecting my father," Alessandro corrected, his voice carrying a warning that made Marco's stomach clench. Vincent set down his fork completely. "Alessandro, we need to talk. Privately. We can talk in front of Marco. He's family now. That's exactly what we need to discuss." The tension was so thick Marco could barely breathe. Sophia, sitting beside him, reached over and squeezed his hand under the table. But even her reassurance couldn't shake the feeling that something dangerous was happening. Something he didn't understand. Alessandro folded his newspaper with deliberate precision. "Gentlemen, let me make something very clear. This boy is under my protection. His mother is receiving the best medical care money can buy. They will both be provided for, permanently. Anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with me personally." Vincent leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth that made Marco think of wolves sizing up prey. "Of course, boss. We're just surprised, that's all. It's been a long time since you've taken such a personal interest in charity cases." "Charity?" Alessandro's voice went dangerously quiet. "This boy's father took a bullet that was meant for my family. That's not charity, Vincent. That's honor. That's loyalty. Two things I thought you understood." Marco felt like he was watching a chess game where he couldn't see the board. Every word seemed to have a hidden meaning. Every glance carried weight he couldn't measure. But he could feel the danger radiating from Vincent like heat from a fire. After breakfast, Alessandro walked Marco to the garage where a driver waited to take him to visit his mother. But before they reached the car, Alessandro put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Marco, I need you to listen very carefully. There are people in my organization who don't understand why I'm helping you. They think kindness is weakness. They think loyalty is something you buy and sell." Marco looked up at the man who had saved his mother's life. "Are you in trouble because of us?" Alessandro smiled, but it didn't hide the worry in his eyes. "I've been in trouble my whole life, son. That's nothing new, but I need you to promise me something. If anyone ever approaches you, anyone at all, and starts asking questions about me, or my family, or what you've seen in this house, you come to me immediately. Don't try to handle it yourself. Don't try to protect me. Just come find me. Can you do that?" Marco nodded, though he didn't fully understand what he was agreeing to. At the hospital, Maria was looking stronger. The color was returning to her cheeks, and her breathing was easier. But when Marco told her about the conversation at breakfast, about the man named Vincent and the way he'd looked at her son, Maria's face went pale. "Marco," she said, gripping his hand tightly, "I need to tell you something about your father, something I should have told you years ago." The boy settled into the chair beside her bed, sensing that whatever his mother was about to say would change everything. "Your father didn't just work for the Romano family," Maria began. "He was Alessandro's most trusted friend. They grew up together on the same streets. When Alessandro's father was building the organization, Joey was right beside him. But your father had a secret, something that could have destroyed everything Alessandro cared about." Marco's heart started racing. "What kind of secret?" Maria closed her eyes, as if the memory itself was painful. "Your father was working with the FBI. He was going to testify against the Romano organization in exchange for protection for us. He was going to bring down the entire family." The words hit Marco like a physical blow. His father, the hero Alessandro described, the loyal friend who died protecting the Romano family, had actually been betraying them. "But he never got the chance," Maria continued. "The night before he was supposed to meet with federal agents, rival gangsters attacked. Your father had to choose in that moment, save Alessandro's family or save himself, and he chose Alessandro. Does Mr. Romano know?" Marco asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't think so. If he did, we'd both be dead right now. The Romano family doesn't forgive betrayal, Marco. Not ever." As if summoned by their conversation, the hospital room door opened. But it wasn't Alessandro who walked in. It was Vincent Torino, holding a bouquet of flowers and wearing that wolf-like smile. "Mrs. Vitale," he said smoothly, "how nice to see you looking so much better. And young Marco. What a pleasure to finally meet Joey's boy." Marco felt his mother's hand tighten around his. Every instinct told him to run, but there was nowhere to go. "I thought we should have a little chat," Vincent continued, settling into the chair across from them. "About the past. About your husband's work with the Romano family. About certain secrets that some people might find very interesting." The flowers he'd brought were lilies. Marco didn't know much about flowers, but even he knew that lilies were what you brought to funerals. "I don't know what you're talking about," Maria said, but her voice shook. Vincent's smile widened. "Oh, I think you do. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think you're going to help me make sure Alessandro Romano finally pays for all the mistakes he's made over the years." Marco realized in that moment that his simple act of kindness, helping a crying girl in a playground, had set something in motion that was far bigger and more dangerous than he could have imagined. The man who had saved his mother's life was about to become his enemy's target, and the secret his father had died protecting was about to destroy them all. "What do you want?" Marco asked, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. Vincent turned those cold eyes on the boy. "I want justice, son. I want Alessandro Romano to understand what happens when you trust the wrong people. And you, young Marco, are going to help me give it to him." But Vincent had made one critical mistake. He had underestimated what a desperate child would do to protect the people he loved. And he had no idea that Marco had inherited more than just his father's name. He had inherited his father's courage, his mother's fierce loyalty, and something else entirely. Something that would turn this game of betrayal and revenge in a direction no one saw coming. That night, Marco lay awake in the hospital chair beside his mother's bed, Vincent's words echoing in his head like a death sentence. The man wanted to use him as a weapon against Alessandro, the only person who had shown them kindness in years. But how could an 8-year-old boy fight against a grown man who smiled like a predator and spoke in riddles that felt like threats? His mother had fallen into an uneasy sleep after Vincent left, but Marco could see the fear etched into every line of her face. She whispered his father's name in her dreams, and Marco wondered if she was asking for forgiveness or for strength. At dawn, Alessandro arrived with Sofia and a bag of fresh clothes. The moment he walked through the door, Marco could see the change in him. Gone was the gentle man who had knelt in the playground. This was the Alessandro Romano that Vincent's smile had been warning about. Dangerous, alert, ready for war. "How's your mother feeling?" Alessandro asked, but his eyes were scanning the room, noting details, looking for signs of disturbance. "Better," Marco said carefully, "but we had a visitor last night." Alessandro went very still. Sofia was arranging flowers in a vase, humming softly to herself, completely unaware of the tension that had just filled the room like poison gas. "What kind of visitor?" Alessandro's voice was casual, but Marco heard the steel underneath. Before Marco could answer, his mother stirred awake. The moment she saw Alessandro, her face crumpled with shame and terror. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I should have told you years ago." Alessandro moved closer to the bed, his expression softening. "Told me what, Maria?" The words came tumbling out in a rush. 20 years of buried secrets. 20 years of guilt and fear. She told him about Joey's plan to testify, about the FBI meetings, about the choice her husband had made in those final moments. She told him about Vincent's visit, about the threats hidden behind flower petals and friendly smiles. When she finished, the room was silent except for the steady beeping of medical equipment and Sofia's quiet humming as she continued arranging flowers, lost in her own innocent world. Alessandro sat heavily in the chair beside the bed. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, he began to laugh. Not the cruel laughter of someone who had been betrayed, but the surprised laughter of someone who had just solved a puzzle that had been bothering him for decades. I knew, he said simply. Maria stared at him. What? I knew about the FBI meetings. I knew about the testimony. I've known for 20 years. Marco felt the world tilt sideways. But then why did you help us? Why didn't you kill you? Alessandro finished gently. Because your father came to me the night before he was supposed to testify. He told me everything. He said he'd made a mistake, that he was scared for his family, that he wanted out but didn't know how to get out without destroying everyone he cared about. He looked at Maria with something that might have been forgiveness. Your husband was going to disappear that night, take you and baby Marco and vanish forever. New names, new lives. Somewhere the FBI and my family would never find you. But then the Castellanos attacked, and Joey had to make a choice. Run and save himself, or stay and save the people who trusted him, despite everything. Maria was crying now, 20 years of guilt pouring out in broken sobs. He chose you, even knowing what it would cost him. He chose honor, Alessandro corrected. And that's why Vincent's plan won't work. That's why his threats mean nothing. Because I've been protecting Joey's family, not in spite of what he did, but because of what he did. Your husband proved that loyalty isn't about blind obedience. It's about making the right choice when everything is on the line. 3 months later, Vincent Torino was found in his car at the bottom of the Chicago River. The official report said it was an accident. Those who knew better understood it was justice. Marco never asked what happened to the man who had threatened his family. Some questions don't need answers. Today, Marco Vitale sits in the front row of his high school graduation ceremony. Valedictorian, full scholarship to Northwestern University. His mother, Maria, sits beside Alessandro and Sofia, tears streaming down her face as she watches her son accept his diploma. The boy who once dug through garbage cans for medicine money now speaks 3 languages and plans to study law. But that's not the end of this story. Because kindness has a way of multiplying. The Marco Vitale Foundation, established with Alessandro's backing, has helped over 300 homeless children find families, education, and hope. Each child they save goes on to save others. Each life they change changes more lives in return. Sometimes people ask Marco why he still visits that playground where it all began. Why he sits on that same bench where he once comforted a crying little girl. And his answer is always the same. Because that's where he learned that the smallest acts of kindness can change everything. That's where he discovered family isn't about blood or money or power. It's about showing up when someone needs you most. Alessandro Romano learned something that day too. That the empire he'd built meant nothing compared to the family he'd found. That true strength isn't about fear or control. It's about choosing compassion when the world expects cruelty. And Sofia? She's 15 now, volunteers at the foundation every weekend, and still believes that friendship can solve any problem. She was right that day in the playground. Marco wasn't just helping her. They were saving each other. That's what real families do. Remember, you never know when your small act of kindness might change someone's entire world. When your choice to stay instead of walk away might save a life. When your decision to see someone instead of look through them might create a family where there was none before. If this story touched your heart, hit that subscribe button, share it with someone who needs hope, and remember that sometimes the person you save ends up saving you right back.